I have been enjoying re-listening to our conversations together because there's so much that we are touching upon, and so much so that I have a little notebook now that I'm taking notes in that
Hmm.
are helping me to be able to remember key aspects of what we spoke about that piqued my interest, um, either in relationship to wanting to say, can you clarify that? Or,
Yeah.
wow, that's significant. Or, uh, this is something that would be useful to clarify for others in relationship to certain tradition or your experience or in relationship to Adida. And then my own confession is that I find this useful in many ways. But one that I want to point out is that in all the years of my living directly with Adida, and then also all the permutations in terms of how it seemed to be at a distance in relationship to his physical body, but never in relationship to satsang,
Right.
is that all the time there was something that I noted and listened to many people saying, and that was that I can respond to Adi Da, but I have found it difficult to choose to participate because of what I observe that is occurring around him. And also, and I'm not wanting to focus on that in and of itself, but I'll make a
Right.
point in terms of why I find that interesting, is that it became a curiosity to me what that actually meant. And as you know, a curiosity is where indicating where attention is going to. And then where attention and energy goes to, then it creates actual happenings. You know, that's the event of life. And then the conjunctions come into being. And so I think that a lot of the curiosity that I had in the earlier times of living very in close proximity and then living in the different circles or the rings of the mandala, and even in very much in the world, that I began to notice that there are so many beings that have a response to Adida, and yet the choices in terms of how any individual responds is very, very different. And so
Mhm.
in your process, what I'm observing is that you had a lot of also different forms of interaction with different people, different individuals, different responses on the part of different individuals. And so that I am wanting to, I'm feeling into this curiosity that came about. Like, how do they do that? What is the choice and why? Particularly from the perspective of my having been on his body
Right.
and it being really clear that the direct relationship, not only through the directness, the most directness in reality of satsang itself, but also the directness of this is Adida is the source in his bodily human form. So it's not like you're picking out his teaching out of the ether.
Right.
You
Right.
know, he said, and then this is why he often said that the teacher and the teaching is the same. You know, there's no distinction to be made um,
Right.
in the form of in the actual realization of it, and that's where the transmission comes from.
Right.
So I was remembering then in the midst of this samyama is Adida's communication from day one, and even at what began to occur for him in the Vedanta temple was that as soon as realization was obvious, the obviousness of it, the self-authenticating truth in the Vedanta temple of the specific brightness being something that was fully obvious, that was his condition in which everything was lived and all was moved and the intelligence or the discrimination of the heart came forth, is that automatically he became one, like an obviousness of his work and his purpose was in relationship to, as he characterizes it, everyone and everything. the non-differentiation of the bright as the all-pervading, all-inclusive reality itself that doesn't negate or dissociate from, but can it feelingly at the heart in relationship to truth discriminate between the ego act and what it creates and the divine process and the divine Leela. So that curiosity in relationship to you, and also with anyone that I speak to, really anyone, whether they know about Adida or not, in terms of a cognitive awareness, a conscious participation by virtue of actually responding to him directly, whether it be his word, his darshan, a Leela, a story, some sort of his dharma, and the not even just the dharma meaning written teaching, but dharma as a whole, as it's understood more broadly, that the truth of his work and presence being directly available to everyone and everything. This is what is interesting, most interesting, because it goes beyond any cultic form of relationship to him, in relationship to form itself. So that's my response in terms of how this is feeling auspicious to do. As many individuals that can be spoken to who have a response to Adida that may differ even from what we've been considering together and devotees have been considering for a long time, which is how does the form or the formalities manifest in relationship to Adida and truth itself, the giver of the original condition, the condition that is true of everyone and everything, the truth itself, and what he characterizes as the one and only, which is not any form of identification with a separate self or a separate entity, which many people make that error of assumption. So they just think he's crazy and he's calling himself God, which just represents a misunderstanding, a profound misunderstanding about the nature of his confession and revelation. So in our dialogue, I feel that because of the differences, like you were involved in the community, you received the gift, you received the initiation, the formal relationship was established, the recognition of Siddha Guru, satsang, the initiatory process. But then what's interesting to me is at a certain point, after your interaction with the larger gathering in the 80s, in 83, you made an evaluation based upon your own process of life experience and the reception of his transmission and what occurred in your meditation, your relationship to Chogyam Trungpa, your life experience altogether, that you chose and made the observation that this demonstration isn't happening in the collective. And that had a pivotal play in what your life, how your life unfolded from that time on. It's not that you didn't have any form of association with devotees. Like you still had relationships with many devotees, but the actual context that was continuing to function in direct relationship to Adida as he established his treasures was not something you chose to continue to participate in. So This is a curiosity of mine, because this seems to be the conundrum, of how does the divine manifest in form that has integrity, okay? So there you go. I'll stop talking. But I have some to the point, on the point.
And is there a question that we could start with that?
Yeah. So I took some points, took some notes that I have a number of different points that are also reflect what I'm speaking about in our dialogue in the last two sessions. And the first one was that when you had that experience in the bookstore and all of what was triggered in terms of your previous experiences in relationship to LSD. And then you had the sitting in the room with devotees and the puja that James did, that where there was the invocation, and that unfolding of like going through experiential aspects of what was triggered in the sphere of Adida's satsang, and then in the room and the invocation by a true priest who was able to actually bring down and noticing the effulgence of Adida's presence in that space, and then moving that, being with devotees in the household, and then moving that forward, and then having the experience of moving, then choosing to go back to New Orleans after that. And there was a line that you said, is that period of time and what you experienced then, and your relationship to the teaching, it did not move you significantly enough at that point in time to draw you to want to see him, like go to see him. And I just wanted to ask, do you remember, or in retrospect, what was the reasoning for the seeming like not being able to put together that the teacher and the teaching was something that moved you strong enough to actually want to go and be in his company, but that occurred a bit later?
I'm not quite sure I understand your question. Why didn't that time when I was in that in the puja with James and that, I'm not following.
A comment that you made after you indicated your response to Adida and his teaching, and then the experience that you had in the bookstore, and you made a comment after you described those events to me, and you said that you were most attracted to Adida through his teaching.
Right.
And so at that point, it did not draw you, and you didn't quite connect that what you experienced there at that time was actually a direct transmission from him. Unless I'm misunderstanding what you said.
No, that's true. That's true. Now, I guess I always saw him as a universal communication. So I understood that there was a person, there was a being, there was a social and a gathering around him. But I didn't feel a need to go into a social situation. I knew it wasn't like I was going to be drawn into his intimate company and get a pat on the head and say, you're a good devotee or whatever. I didn't feel that there was a need to be in his. I didn't think even possible that you could get into his physical company, and I don't know. I wasn't drawn. I just wasn't drawn. I didn't think I needed to.
Well, So again, I'm not placing any judgment or qualification.
Yeah, no, I hear you. You're trying to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I asked, and it's not like I might not be able to comprehend it. There's a lot of things I can comprehend, but as I communicated in terms of why I find this dialogue useful, is to locate the thread of what moved any individual, even as it appears differently, so that there's no justification for judgment, taboos.
So I guess
you don't have to have a right or wrong answer. Yeah.
No, I mean, if I were trying to give you a reason or an explanation, or the question really implies why wouldn't you want to go into his physical company knowing what you have received? Um,
Yes, because yes, exactly. Because
yeah,
for me, it was like that entering the guru enters devotee, the Siddha yoga, the
yeah,
and Siddha yoga. I had no Buddhist background, at least in this lifetime. I'm sure I did otherwise, but that my immediate was in love, and I'm there with him, and the world falls away.
right.
Literally, the world falls away, and I am at his feet within a very short period of time, and I don't leave. So that does not characterize, as he indicated, most beings. And that is also doesn't indicate that that makes me more qualified, better than, or more advanced, or that realization is more guaranteed in my case than any other. So this is the crux of what is curious to me: realization without superimposing cultic, religious, or spiritual errors on that fundamental process.
Yeah, I think he
Mm.
said it himself when he was moving out of the Bubba world into the Divine Communion in '77, where he says, I can't have everybody in my living room, you know.
Mm.
So this is for a select few people, and he has said many things about that, and I'll just to make it somehow understandable, um, you know, people have previous time karmic relationships with him for some reason or whatever, and that previous lives or different kinds of situations brought them to him. But I mean, if he really is, as he says he is, and I believe he is, a world teacher, I mean, the whole world can't go to the island of Fiji or can't go to his living room or can't go to the sanctuary. And so clearly, for me, I feel that I didn't need to go into his physical company. And it was perfectly fine for me to just be where I was, wherever I was. But I also did commit to go and become a student and participate in the social and the religious and uh, um, the cultural format that they had, and that was very instructive for me, and that was helpful. It didn't
Mm.
it didn't make any difference to my relationship to him. What I then got to see was the dynamic that I was on I mean, I was in the fifth row back in the upper bleachers. I wasn't in your upper inner core. I mean, I'm back in the bleachers and I'm kind of not invited in. In fact, it's kind of funny because one time when he was coming to the Love of the God Man, I was actually cooking as a service function. I was cooking in the manner of flowers. I mean, in the great food dish in on the mountain of attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he actually came onto the mountain of attention, I was a cook in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And and then all the devotees, all the mahas, all the inner group of people were now going to set the setting to conform the outer area to conform to him. And of course, one of the
Yeah.
major items was food. And I'm thinking, oh, this is a wonderful opportunity. I'll get to prepare food for the guru, and I was actually looking forward to that. And then I shouldn't mention names, but I will because it's funny, and I don't hold any grudge or anything. But this is the dynamic. So I'm in the kitchen, and Stefan comes in the kitchen and looks around and says, "You have to go, you have to go, you have to go, and you have to go." And I was one of the ones who had to go because apparently I didn't fit his sense of He didn't know me. I guess I didn't know, but I was told to leave the kitchen. So uh, the way it operated for me was never an invite. It was more of, you know, kind of, you're not qualified. And that was just one incident of that kind of thing. And that was fine. I didn't, it's just the way what I learned was how the community operated, how the people worked, how they were getting along or not getting along, or what they were, I had to learn the ways of the group. There were 1,000 people there, not just at the ceremony, but in Northern California. If I'm not mistaken, there must have been at least 500 or 600 or 700 people living in that Northern California area, where we always had some kind of, you go to the Oddfellows Hall in Mill Valley, there were, 100 to 200 people there easily.
Mm.
And there was a lot of interaction. So there's a whole social dynamic within that realm. So I didn't, I didn't, I saw the dynamic, and it wasn't operating, and I wasn't political in the sense of trying to get myself in there and whatever.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
But it didn't make any difference. Didn't make any difference to me. I was just learning the ways and the way in which the community operated.
Right. So did the way you indicated that the way that it operated didn't impress you?
No.
And I'm not making any judgment or anything negative about them or about you. The choices that are made upon the basis of how we respond to Adida has everything to do with the freeing of energy and attention from the vasanas, or the psychobiography of the ego, the patterning that will be outshined so that the full realization may manifest. And I'm noticing is, like, you use the word social. And I'm thinking of Stefan, and I know Stefan very intimately and very well, and he's a priest, significantly qualified and effective priest. And I know, as being in the position where I've walked into rooms and said, you go, you go, you go, you go. And I've been on the part where I'm in the room after decades and somebody says to me, you go, you go, you go, you go, and the mind just goes at that point. It's like, this doesn't make any sense. And and good to have humor about it. And yet in certain times it strikes a chord where it can initiate a whole process of purification, insight, understanding. I mean, and devotees will tend to call this the guru's play.
Right.
And when I'm hearing what you're describing, I immediately am sympathetic with both what you're saying and with what Stefan's doing, and with the event itself, okay, in terms of what's going to manifest, in terms of reception of responsive beings in Adida's darshan, in his sanctuary, all of that. So here's this setting. And I know my first question is, did that instruction come directly from Adida? These individuals, did Adida know who was in the kitchen? Because at different points in time, Adida actually knew quite a bit about who was doing what and where. And then at other times, he didn't at all, would know who was actually on the sanctuary doing this, that, or the other thing. The closer into proximity to him, the more he knew exactly who was there and who was doing what. And as you got further out, they didn't. So I noticed that in relationship to what happened to you, and I think thousands of beings can tell stories like this, and I'm not exaggerating when I say thousands, because there have been many who have ventured into the response to him, his teaching, the gathering, the culture, the community, and something gets triggered and choices are made based upon an assumption or a reaction or a response in relationship to a certain event. So Stefan is is Stefan actually effectively following something that he thinks is right to do? Does that have integrity or does it not? And the reverberations of that in relationship to how it impacts others. And the fact that he did have integrity or not, does that make any difference in relationship to the response of the individual devotee? So this is an important conversation. And to feel, I'm hearing what you're saying is that for your particular response to beloved, and you're already receiving your insight song, you're responding to him, you're making use of all of the knowledge and experience that you have, and this doesn't really matter that much to you. That's interesting. So because it forms the way that you end up then choosing to associate years on, even up to this point, where you have a kind of a manner of continuing to relate to many different devotees and their various forms of response to Adida, and you are doggedly focused in a very significant service to him directly, and able to navigate how you do that in a way that I feel has a level of integrity, and yet there would also be an evaluation made that if the priest, according to the formalities, said, you shouldn't be here, you don't get to go there. Now, I know that I'm bringing up maybe some muddy waters here, and you don't have to address all of that, but my curiosity is, I respect you, I trust you, I feel your response to beloved, and I want to bring forth the integrity of, even though I'm not formally acknowledged either, we're not formally acknowledged, and yet our relationship to Adida and the process that we've been involved in is absolutely, tangibly authentic.
Yeah.
And now I will try to buy it.
Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, there's the, I don't know, maybe it's just I've been around the block or whatever. It's a theatrical whatever. I do understand that if you were in his physical company, it would be a completely different kind of energy field, and the sensitivity to him, and that power of his siddhi and what that brings up for one in his company, and the two sides of it, that so it's all like intensified. It's just always the fire is always on. And I understand that. And had I been brought into, or if I made myself available to do that, I wasn't going to shy away. I had no sense of that. I was kind of avoid, people tell me today that they actually wanted to just stay in the fifth bleacher seat, not get close to the fire, and they would do what they wanted to do, and they could just live comfortably in the warmth of the basking of his sweetness, if you will, and didn't want to get into, because they understood that they saw some of the effect from people who did stay in his company, and the impact that had on them personally. And some of it was quite purifying in a good way, and some of it was purifying in a very hard way that was hard to understand. So everybody understood. Nobody was, naive to the fact that, you're going into the fire, and it's a blessing fire, but it's a fire in itself. So you're going to be, the limitations will be definitely burned or sizzling.
Yes.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
And that's understood. I surely wasn't trying to stay in the bleachers, but it just wasn't my fate or whatever to be that way,
Right. Okay, that's clear. That's good. I like what you said it helps me then understand the choices in response. And then that dialogue to be able to become clear that served and was a choice that was made for very real reasons. And it wasn't about not being responsive.
Yeah, but it was even beyond my choice. I didn't have choices. It was like, I don't have full control over where I am. I mean, I'm brought here and you're brought there and you're brought by the wave of a much bigger energy system that brings one
Yeah,
to a place. So it's not like I have a
yeah,
choice and I did this and I did that. Yeah, I got my car and I drove there, but there were 1,000 other variables and other people and situations and things that bring people to a situation. So this is the karmic
yes,
wave
yes,
or the larger kind of the vasanas that you're speaking, the things that you can't even see that bring you to a situation, you know.
yes, yes, very much active. So much more is active in
Yeah.
any given moment
And
than
if you
what we
understand
allow ourselves to be aware of.
And if you understand that, you're more clarified with where you are, and then you can deal with the immediacy of what's in your environment and what you can change and what you can't change, what you can
Yeah.
do, what you can't do. Then that's your responsibility. But for the larger,
Mm,
you know,
mm,
uh, wave of your life, you know.
yeah, 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 yes. And so when you came into Adida's darshan, satsang, and then the sangha, and because of your experience in relationship to having done the same thing with Chogyam Trungpa and his satsang and sangha, even though those words, well, they could be applied more broadly, um, you already had a more mature and experienced understanding of these dynamics, whereas somebody else might not. So, and in the thousands of people and whoever going for seeming in time and space going forward will also thus respond to Adida's teaching. The individual who comes into conjunction will, because of their, as we're speaking about, all of the various forms of um, patterning that's associated, an individual could be much more mature than somebody who's already been in Adidas satsang for decades. There may be, there's no way to make a judgment relative to maturity, humanly, religiously, or spiritually, in terms of an individual's availability to respond and how they may choose to respond. Do you feel that's fair enough to say? Because when
Oh, very,
I see
yeah,
when, yeah, yeah. And
yeah. There's
I'm
no,
saying I observe this. I have observed this as one who has been around for decades, most directly and intimately. And then here I am in dialogue with someone who had a very different kind. And I'm acknowledging that you were much more mature in many, many ways in your coming into Adida's sphere than I was. Although there were aspects of my deeper personality that Adida pointed to that were much more mature than my human gross incarnation, being the flibbertigibbet from the valley, you know?
yeah.
Yeah. So these nuances are really significant. And when you speak about the broadness of the universal ability to be able to comprehend his being, the person that you are responding to, the teacher and his teaching, your ability to grasp it at a universal or a cosmic level. I didn't even know what that would have meant when I first came into his sphere. Mine was local, really
Mhm.
local, and it could have had to do with what he pointed to previous forms of incarnation in direct relationship to um, uh, the his lineage, so to speak, or the preparatory mechanisms or vehicles, the Ramakrishna Vivekananda association in which he indicated that I was Josephine McLeod. And also even all of these characters that we want to define as that certain person, we come to understand that that's not even the correct way of understanding any arising seemingly separate entity. It's only the point of this that tries to identify it in a story or a myth that actually ends up not actually accounting for the totality. Is that your understanding too?
Well, it's a different, what you're speaking about is identity and what you identify
Yes.
with, whether you're identifying this lineage and this. So it's all about identity. And for me, it's all kind of, that's not really the thing. I may, you may have brought you there because you were in that karmic situation or whatever like that. But it's still identity. And that was never, that's still a kind of a badge or some kind of, I've earned my way here, or I've done this and I've been here and to live in that
Yeah.
kind of, yes, they were, that's like, to live in a past life. I can't even live in my past high school world, that's even closer than that one is.
Yes.
It's so ridiculous to me. I understand.
Yes.
I get it.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So see, this is what I'm beginning to feel, is that the field within which and the understanding that you have and continue to have, which is I know by virtue of our conversations that has only been validated or proven, the broader ability to be able to look at it in a way that is more inclusive than the liability for a cultic orientation.
That's a key word for me, inclusive.
Mm, mm, mm. And then it ties also in with what you spoke about relative to what was revealed to you through the LSD, ayahuasca, your relationship to Buddhism, your meditation practice. And when you spoke about not being able to take on the bodhisattva vow. So that choice is another interesting choice, because when I was speaking to you about that, I was asking you about the vow of devotion as a devotee. So
Right.
There's something about the labels, like the social, the identity, the labels.
That's not the label. That's a deeper, for me, that's a deeper thing.
Okay.
Because it brings, for me, it brings in I believe I said last time I didn't trust myself in making that commitment. I didn't trust my promise, my oath, my vow. I think probably it's because this kind of I learned very clearly in some of my experiences that this kind of duality, this splitting, this kind of the two and the one, when I got into places that really required me to make a decision, I'll tell you one experience in an ayahuasca time. I was in an ayahuasca session, and there was one of the chief disciples of the Maestre in this lineage, and he was leading them. And there was about 6 of them. There's 6 disciples, like the 12 apostles and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting in this outdoor session with one of the master's disciples, and I'm being brought into higher level. Okay, my eyes are closed, but I'm traveling. Okay, with ayahuasca, I travel in a psychic manner, right? So in that state of consciousness, there's all sorts of conversations going on when I'm into different levels of dimensions. And it's not a conversation with the mouth. It's a conversation with the heart. So there's no really like talking, but there's a full conversation going on. And there are choices to make in these realms that really require a decision, a choice, a matter, something's going on. But it's not it's not a mind, but there's a vision, can be a vision associated with it. So that's the context of what I'm saying. So I'm in this kind of higher state, and I'm being brought into these realms, and I'm allowed to enter into these realms, and they're magnificent, and they're blissful, and they seemingly like are for eternity. And there's a voice that's kind of guiding this loka. And I understand that I am in a loka. And I'm this is not my place, but I'm allowed to enter into it, and there's all sorts of things happening. And that at one time in that session, in that loka, it was okay, you're with us now. It wasn't like, would you like to become a member? It was like, would you like to enter into this path? Now, it wasn't said in that language, but that was the implication. I was brought into this realm. I was asked, is this going to be your path? And it was an extremely blissful place. And I said no, but I didn't say no. My heart said, no, this is not my place. And all of a sudden, there was this chorus of, oh, like I refused, where I was given this extraordinary divine seat place. And I was asked to become part of that as my lineage. And I said no, but I didn't say no. My heart said no. Because, I mean, I really do have a connection with Arida. But this is where, I mean, I'm in these realms. But Arida doesn't even come into my mind. And I'll tell you other situations about the same kind of astral kind of travel. What the social questions that you were asking me really have never made I mean, this is a heart matter. This is a heart decision. It's not even, you don't even ask a question if you're going to make it, if you're a devotee. You either are or you're not. And it shows itself. Right. That's all. You don't have to put a flag out or, say, I'm going to do this. And so it's there. It's a heart matter. It's not a mind matter. It's not a social matter. It's not It's a heart matter, and that heart matter will show itself in life. So you don't even have to say
mm,
anything. You don't have to prove anything to
mm,
anybody. You live your life.
mm,
If the situation allows you to enter into these places that may conform to some kind of social
mm,
mechanism on this level of game here, then it works. Then you don't have to say anything. You're in the inner temple. You don't even have to say you're a devotee. You're in the civil hall, so you're there. You don't
mm,
even have to say
mm,
I'm here. I'm
mm,
I'm I'm
mm,
F whatever.
mm,
But
mm.
so I don't know if that's fully answering your question, but I use that kind of um, metaphor um,
Yes,
to
yes,
explain.
yes.
So I
Mm, mm. No, you're spot on in terms of while it appears as though we are having a conversation about uh, social interactions or choices. Any choice that any individual may make is being influenced by very both profound and mundane patterning. And yet, if the heart itself, if your infidelity to truth itself, that is what will spontaneously move your choice. And I understand precisely what you're saying in that. And that is a profundity that honors the fidelity to the true Siddha Yoga, not the secondary aspects of the evaluation from point of view perspectives of different individuals. Um, Unless you're in a room and you can feel the integrity of the space and the place and the people. This is what I'm feeling from your communication, is that all-inclusive evaluation of the integrity of that space
so
and
the
room.
the the room will tell you if that room is in his place, in his room, that will show itself.
Mm,
Whatever room you're in,
mm,
to the
mm.
degree that magnification happens, then that's the
Yes,
truth of the matter. So
yes,
it's who you with, what room you in, what situation you will always show
mm,
itself.
mm,
So
mm,
so if you're
mm,
in his company, it's magnified to the nth degree, of course, but it
mm,
should be
mm.
that magnification should show itself to some degree outside of that bedroom or the
Yep.
you
Yes.
know it should show it should always be self-evident. It should never have to be like make a claim or you've got to have some social formalities and
Mm,
whatever. But I think prior to all of the social word game, mind game, uniform game, whatever, there isn't. There's a
mm,
there's a there's a heart matter
mm,
that's before
mm.
all of this. And if that's felt with other
Yes.
people, then it
Yes.
magnifies. Then they feel you, you feel
Yes.
them,
Yes. Yes.
it's
Yes.
there.
Yes. Yes. And what you're pointing to in terms of the social ego, Adida's instruction is cooperation plus tolerance equals peace, founded in the recognition of prior unity. Yes. Yes. Profundity. That is what transcends social egoity and establishes it in the native position
It doesn't
that is felt.
eliminate it. It doesn't eliminate it. It transcends it.
That, yes,
So all those
yes,
forms, all those names, all those identities can still be played in whatever
yeah,
form, whatever shape, whatever. And you all understand that there is a
yes,
process that you are
yes.
involved with. It's not like an end game here.
No, 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 no. Yes, yes, yes. Huh. Okay, now that I can feel you in your process and how it came into being and manifested. just a little bit, because it's, the combinations of whatever forms of patterning or conjunctions brought this being, your seeming being manifest here as Ed, I would not be able to comprehend because it's too vast. Same with any individual. And that's Adida's confession, even in terms of his relationship to the great tradition as a whole, and a unique function that he served. Even pointing to his the conjunction with Swami Vivekananda and Ramakrishna, and they're combining even in their lifetime that opened a doorway or a passageway for the manifestation of his function, and combining with Franklin Jones. All of these nuances of seeming identity, seeming function, seeming role, the import is, and the fidelity to it all has to be to reality truth itself, that is prior to, beyond, all inclusive, and is the intelligence and the heart, the true love bliss that knows no opposite. We live that with one another, and that's the yoga. That's what attracts beings. That all-inclusive love bliss, and the intelligence of the heart that enables that all-inclusiveness.
Yeah, because
it
there's a
doesn't
trust.
create
There's
necessary borders.
With that sense of your heart, you have a trust. Now, you can say you live on faith or whatever, but there's you know that you're not struggling, or, you're fundamentally sustained. Yes. You're fundamentally connected. You're fundamentally, whatever the changes are and whatever the conformity, purifications have to happen. Yeah, maybe difficult, maybe painful, maybe, life is filled with a lot of sharp edges to it, and insults and things of that sort.
Constantly, if you're at all sensitive, if you're actually open, you're extremely sensitive to this. And this is what I feel you're describing, because, and I don't know if this is true to be said, because it's hard to be able to account for why someone responds to something as they do, unless you're looking at it in Freudian terms, or another kind of a mapping, superimposing a mapping that is giving names or meanings to why anything is happening at all. But your openness or availability, and trusting to go with it, in terms of where you will move to do. So I'm hearing, which is really significant, that this awakening in the heart that occurred for you is your place of fidelity, and that is in conjunction with and coinciding with Adida's teaching and revelation. And I respect it.
And his person, I can tell.
Yes, precisely.
Go ahead. And when he says person, he doesn't just mean person. His idea of person is all of it. A thing, like a noun, person, place, a thing. It's a person. This is a living being. This is alive. This is
the living being, all inclusive.
Everything is vibrating, alive. Every cell, every 24/7. You consciously need to sleep and rest and be, whatever. But even while you're sleeping and dreaming and whatever, all of this is still happening. And there's no avoid. You can't. can't get away. If you tried, you couldn't get
Yeah.
away.
Yes.
You can't.
Yes. Yes. So this brings me back to remembering what you said about when you saw Adida in the tent at the Love of the God Man, and you were close enough to look into his eyes, and you indicated that there was no person there, but in that moment, what you were meaning is no separate self.
Exactly. Yeah. Death. And that's where this
Yes.
kind of why I was always focusing in on
Mm.
the well, in the beginning, he talked a lot about easy death and it became a popular notion out in the culture, ego death. In the early magazines here, there's a lot about death in the early Laughing Man magazines.
Mm.
I remember Marcia telling me during some of the Garbage and the Goddess period, there was so much intensity that people thought there was going to be an end. It had a kind of a frightening quality to it
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
there is a sense of annihilation, not like, but this is what the ego will be up against because
Mm.
if the ego's holding its position,
Mm. Mm. Mm.
because it is about surrender, it is about
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
sacrifice.
Mm. Mm.
So anything less than that,
Mm. Mm.
it's going to be a threat. There's a threat, where there's
Yes.
another, there's a threat.
Yes. Yes. So that's why Adida uses the language that the devotee volunteers for that based on radical understanding of the illusion of the separate self. Not that a vulnerable, heart-feeling, manifest being doesn't exist. The separate self doesn't exist.
Never did.
Mm. It's that act is an illusion. The arising is always arising. There's always arising. Is it a form that you recognize as sacred and it's demonstrating that you are in relationship to it as sacred, not separate self? Is that the form? And is the reciprocation coming in relationship that recognition is also true in relationship? The way is a relationship to the all of recognition
And one
of
of
the
the
truth
things
of it.
that what I find people really have struggled with is that the knowing of all of this is absolutely undermined. And
Mm-hmm.
this is where the ignorance consideration is, because you can get so sophisticated with the teaching and so sophisticated with the mind.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
fundamentally,
Mm.
all of this understanding is way gone. You cannot have any full comprehension of this process.
Yes.
And this is
Yes.
where the submission has to occur.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the one who is enlightened is not you being enlightened.
Yes.
There
Yes.
is only what is already the case.
Yes. Yes. And so this
And
is
that,
also why the written word, and which has been an incredible passion of yours to work with, Adidas, written communication, which from your confession and expression is not dissociated from his person, the person of truth. It is the realizer is the realization. The teacher is the teaching. The
didn't
truth
fall
is
out of
the
the
truth.
sky.
No, no, no. And so the working with the language, as Adida has demonstrated, is an art form. It's a process of one of his art forms, one of his treasures, one of the means. And it is, and as he said, even the last year of his life, indicating that if beings had come to me already prepared, I wouldn't have had to write a word. I would have just been able to sit. The profundity of that, to really feel the profundity of that. So, like I'm responding to your indicating about knowledge, like it's not knowledge of mind that is created by the ego act. Yet he does use the language perfect knowledge. He was always using different forms of language in an artful, as an artist would do, to draw you to feel the event of the installation of the divine in manifest form. And he spoke that so differently depending upon the conjunctions of who he was combining with, reflecting back and working with. So all of the permutations of Bubba's form, Franklin, Bubba, Master, Bhagavan, Adida, all the different names and the forms and all these permutations of the ceremony, the ritual, the worship, the structuring and all of that, he makes abundantly clear is completely secondary to the fundamental recognition, the root yoga that requires this comprehension, this radical understanding.
Yeah, and if you fully understand his submission and his unique place in history, in the world history, where all of this he had to absorb, he had to take all of this on. He had to take it on. He had to take it on. That was his crucifixion. His took it on to transform it.
Yes. And because of the bright not being, the bright was inherently not separated from it.
That's the only way he could have endured it.
Yeah. So it wasn't like an act of his that he was doing. He was, as the seventh stage process demonstrated itself, non-separately as the bright. All of the various events in the transfiguration, transformation, indifference, and outshining was a demonstration for the sake of devotees, true devotees.
Well, I mean, if that divine emergence event, if that in itself speaks volumes and volumes to this understanding of what his process was about. And so,
and that was the reaction. He said, when he made that clear, this is my submission is no longer necessary. Your submission is required. We're like, okay, adios. Yeah. You mean I can't take what you're giving and use it for me?
Yeah.
And he indicated to the last days of his life that was the fallout, from his revelation. Basically, kind of saying nobody's interested in that. The ego's not interested in that.
I call it the 86 purge.
So, yes, well, this is I just find this so extraordinary because it's a divine process. It's ecstatic to feel the manifestation and to acknowledge it in relationship, and beyond boundaries that egos create, social egos create, and social egos can create it and presume that it's a profundity. They can even attribute it as a profound spiritual realization and transcendental, truth, where it's all just creating duality. It's always just falling into the pattern of duality.
Right.
Yeah.
How about one more question? And because I'm looking at the time, and you have to go, and I do too.
Okay. So I just want to let you know, I'm getting a lot of positive feedback back. People are communicating a lot of appreciation, and they also have like significant questions. So there's one question that someone asked: is it okay if I bring you something that someone is asking about? Yeah. Well, when we were speaking about the necessity for transcending victim consciousness in relationship to human maturity to even begin to be available for the true spiritual process and transcendental spiritual process, we were talking about how in any dynamic where there seems to be someone who has been hurt or a trauma occurs, is that there is an acknowledgement that somehow or other, as a participant in that there's a responsibility a being needs to assume. A devotee asked, well, what about the fact that you carry traumas from previous lifetimes into this lifetime? And does that mean that you're responsible for what occurred in that lifetime? So isn't you, I mean, in other words, there are real victims. I mean, there are abusers and there are people who are abused. And it's like, you didn't ask for it, how are you responsible? It's the root of the question. So I thought it would just give you the opportunity to speak to that.
Well, you could talk about all these past lives, but really they're just repeating themselves in this moment.
Mm.
So the only thing that you can be responsible for is this moment. And the more and more you go forward or the backward or what happened in history or what happened in, you're removing yourself from what your responsibility is. So my body is a condition. I don't know what that is and why I am a man and you're a woman, or I'm not a dog or a frog or whatever. Where I am now. And that is the only responsibility that I need to to pay attention to. I mean, to go into questions about past lives there's no difference between past lives and when you were 8 years old and 10 years old.
Yeah.
That's a past life.
Yeah. It's memory, it's history. Yeah. It's mind.
But see, when the mind gets a little purified, it goes higher and higher. And so thoughts go higher and higher. And you start to get into, what's happening in Washington, what's happening in Berlin, what's happening in Beijing, what's happening. Now you're in a world political situation. Where's the world at? Where's the world? Where are you at? That's really the question. That's the world. That's your world. Yes, I have to worry about the bus and the train and the food supply and the, ecological disasters. But how do I deal with that? I deal with faith, but I also deal with I take care of my own world that conforms to that hopeful message, if you will, for a cleaner, more balanced, more compassionate world. So, yeah, we're all victims. We're all incarnated. Well, I mean, why don't you take that as an opportunity?
Right. Okay. I hear what you're saying. So the responsibility then, no matter what arises, you're pointing to the responsibility. So you're not necessarily responsible for the fact that as you were driving along and suddenly you're sideswiped by somebody, like that person is responsible for whatever happened there and has to be responsible for the aftermath or the outcome of that in relationship, just as the individual who was hit.
Well, I ride a motorcycle and I got hit by somebody who went through a light. And it was out of the blue. In fact, I got hit from behind. I was flying through the air.
Yes, I remember you describing this.
Saying, and time slowed down. I said, how did I get here? As I'm crashing into the 4th Street in San Rafael, and the bike is tumbling, and the car stops, and everybody runs into the middle of the street because I'm tumbling down the street. And I was a victim. I was just going down the street. Somebody came out and hit me. I didn't even see it. Crashed into me.
Yeah. Yes. So when you said, how did I get here? That was That was an unresolvable question in a certain respect.
As I'm flying in the air, I'm on the bike. Next thing I know, I'm jettisoned.
Right.
In a nanosecond.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
I'm flying to the air. I don't recognize where I was 2 seconds ago or half millisecond ago. I mean, oh, how did I get here? You know, it's all my thought is, as he's saying, everything is behind in past time, right? I'm reading what is happening in the real now. I think I'm in the now, but I'm really, 3 nanoseconds behind the now, trying to comprehend the now.
And oftentimes those kinds of traumas can also dissociate you from your sense of being confined to a physical body.
Oh, I was completely disassociated because I was free. I was free of what was happening. I was witnessing it. I was watching it. That's why I was just going, and time slowed down. It was a long period of time before when I went tumbling, But in real time, quote unquote, it happened like that. So I was in a different time dimension. So to get back to the victim, yes, you could go into these places and feel your past lives, or when you were a child, or when your mother, father, whatever happened in yesterday. But that momentum is in this form, this time, this place, this moment here. There's only this moment.
Yes, so transcending the victim consciousness is a profound matter. It's not an ordinary, it's not merely a psychological or psychophysical matter. It's a profound matter of being able to locate that which stands free so that you can be responsible for a right relationship to whatever may occur in life. Because what you were pointing out is that we're all seeming victims and being trapped in a situation. It's like, what the heck? Who am I? Where am I? What is this about? And then you get blows right, left, and center, always reminding you of that.
And that's because if you try to deal with the mechanisms or the history or the psychology, it's just reinforcing it. It's just creating a better situation or a less than painful situation. You're always trying to extricate yourself from it instead of just allowing it to purify through your understanding and through the non-use and all the other mechanisms that he's bringing all into this understanding that you can't. You really can't manipulate things.
So the ego act itself is a victim. It's dramatizing victimization and seeking to get out of it through its own means, which is impossible.
It's inherent. It's inherent in the mechanism of the contraction. As fear is, as sorrow is, as anger is, in its unconscious place. It's in it.
Yes. So the responsibility in response to the revelation that is beyond that and prior to that and all inclusive of that establishes you in the freedom position. And not only the conscious self, but also then allows the bright love bliss to permeate and pervade the body-mind mechanism in relationship to everyone and everything, so that these forms of trauma are actually released in a very real way. Transformed, transfigured, transformed.
As he says, the divine does the yoga.
In that sense, yes, directly.
And whether it's a trauma in this life or the death process, you're going to have to submit. Precisely. And the guru, the true
Siddha Guru Satguru, who is a truly qualified transmission master, not just a verbal teacher of intellectual philosophical dharma, non-dual truth, requires the transmission, not just the intellectual superimposition of a method of thinking. In that relationship, then, he may give instruction to an individual that this is necessary for you to do. And the gross persona goes, well, what the heck does that have to do with me?
What about
Yeah.
Cheech?
Yes,
Cheech,
okay.
Cheech in the automobile accident? You know, all of these things.
The Leelas, yes, yes. Well, in my own case, my seeming to leave his physical company, and he indicated that the associations that I was beginning to combine with had to do with things that occurred in previous lives that had to be business that had to be handled. In other words, the handling of business is allowing the divine love, bliss, and the intelligence of the heart to clarify, purify, and outshine, and grant you the responsibility to be able to be in right relationship to the conjunctions that you find yourself in.
And I will add one thing to your statement there. And I'm not trying to make something, but I really do believe that it is not only your purification, but is a demonstration of the way the process works.
Yes, yes, yes. No, it absolutely is. That is reality consideration. And I'm not talking about teaching years, or even emotional, sexual in and of itself. I'm talking about reality processes of perpetual consideration of submission to what is required to handle business, so that you are liberated, energy and attention is freed.
And that's why the social aspect of this is completely secondary.
Yes.
No matter if you're in the highest of high places or the lowest of low places.
Yes, very, very much so. Very much so. And that has been proven. And I trust that process absolutely, which is the him, not other.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much again for your being available for this. And yeah.
Well, thank you.
We will continue this. Yeah.
I look forward to it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Much love to you.
You too.